right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming today. Welcome those who are joining us for the first time online or here. Those who have joined us before, welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about spiritual depuration. This is the topic, but before that, let's understand what depuration actually means. So the dictionary says that depuration is the purification of impurities, so meaning getting rid of impurities. Of course, when we're talking, when we're adding the spiritual piece there, we're talking about getting our spirit rid of these impurities. So the idea for this lecture, I guess I'd like to share that, came from when I was thinking about topics to give for these talks, for these lectures, and I saw this image of a filter, or I was shown this image of a filter, some may say. And at first I was like, I don't understand, like, why a filter? What does that has to do with anything? And then as soon as I realized this is the idea of something being purified, something that starts perhaps full of impurities, just going down those layers and becoming purified. So that gave me a little light here and being, oh, okay. That's a similar process to what happens with us in our immortal spirits in this long journey as we go through different types of challenges, different reincarnations, different cycles, and then we start to become more purified, or we're getting rid of some impurities as we go through these different layers. The Way, the Truth, and the Life, Emmanuel. By the way, I like to put the source of the slide always on the top right corner. For those who like what it says, you can go and get the book and read it for yourselves. I always encourage that. So on The Way, the Truth, and the Life, Emmanuel is going to say, and first there's going to be a quote that says by James, this is in the Bible, that says, "Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you of double mind." So we're already seeing the word purification here, the purifying your mind, used by James, and we have this from the Bible, chapter 4. And the idea here, the double mind that he's talking about, there's a few different interpretations perhaps, but some that I've read relate to being confused or doubtful in thoughts. So he's saying, purify your hearts, you that are doubtful. You can't have two opposing directions to take on. You can't have that doubt. So he's saying purifying your mind. And Emmanuel is going to say that this inner world is the source of all good and bad principles, and all outward expressions have their base there. So all outward expressions, Emmanuel is saying, have a base in our inner world. What we express outwardly begins inwardly. So he's saying that this endeavor, Emmanuel says, is not simple. This inner cleansing is not simple. Because Emmanuel says that the double mind, so he's using a little bit of what James said. The double mind is, for this renewal to happen, we cannot be of double mind. We cannot be just trying to appear something outwardly without truly changing inwardly. So he's saying this purification that James is talking about, purifying our hearts, they start from that. When we go to the Spirit's book, to understand a little bit more about the spirit, the body, or spirit and matter, and understand this connection and how they operate, let's call it, how they work together, the spirit and the body, this material piece that we still need in order to evolve, in order to continue our purification. Question 22, there's a follow-up question. So 22a, they ask, what definition can you give of matter? They're asking the spirits here. Matter is the element which enchains the spirit, the instrument which serves it, and upon which at the same time it exerts its action. So the instrument which serves the spirit, matter serving the spirit, and the spirit is going to exert a lot of its action through the matter. That's how we are here. We have the incarnate ones, we have matter, and we're exerting action through the matter, but it's the spirit that's behind that action. So what is spirit then? This is the follow-up question. The intelligent principle of the universe. And then they ask, okay, is spirit independent of matter, or is it only one of the properties of matter? Are they actually two separate things, or one is the property of the other? And they're going to answer by saying, spirit and matter are distinct from one another, but the union of spirit and matter is necessary to give intelligent activity to matter. So matter without spirit, we can say, is nothing, basically. We cannot get, it doesn't have its own action, doesn't have its own act on its own volition, but the spirit is the one that puts the will behind it. The spirit is the one that's going to use the matter, as we read it on the question 22, as an instrument. And they even say that matter, there exists in states that are unknown to us, so ethereal and subtle that no impression is made on your senses. So they go even further by saying that there are types of matter that are so subtle and ethereal that they escape our rudimentary senses, the ones that we have right now at our disposal, that we conquered through thousands and thousands of years of spiritual evolution. But it's still matter. So there's still so much matter out there, and even here, that we don't have any idea of. But they're saying it's still considered matter. It's still an instrument that the spirits utilize to exert action. Each spiritual personality has a fluidic body. So this is Emmanuel explaining this is message number 13. What is the flesh? This is the question. This is the title of the message. What is the flesh? Each spiritual personality has a fluidic body. Have you ever noticed that flesh is composed of condensed fluids? So he's using the analogy here for us to understand, for using these words so we can comprehend, and we can start to comprehend what is flesh. He's saying is this condensation of fluids. Of course, he's going to say, when these fluids combine, they obey the imperatives of life on earth. You have designated this process as the law of heredity. However, this combining process is passive and is not self-determining. So he's saying that when we combine these fluids in the matter that we know, we have heredity. This process is passive. Why is it passive? Because we have the laws of God in place. We have things that operate that we don't need to be paying the full attention to that. But it's saying it's not self-determining, meaning the heredity, these imperatives that the matter observe and has to obey here on earth, is not self-determining, meaning it's not going to determine necessarily our destiny, or it's not going to be something that's going to perhaps limit us as much as we sometimes think we are limited by matter. Emmanuel is even going to talk about the sins of the flesh. So what is the sins of the flesh that we hear back in the Bible? He says it's the wrongs caused by the unevolved condition of the spiritual human being. So flesh is going to even say that it's this earthly home where the spirit is in command. These are Emmanuel's words. This earthly home where the spirit is in command. But he's going to say the sins of the flesh are these wrongs caused by the unevolved quality, the spirit that's still full of impurities that we have in this moment in our evolution. What about a hierarchy then? So we're talking spiritual evolution, we're talking about evolving and becoming purified of these impurities and all of that. Is there a hierarchy? So they ask the spirits that. And question 96 is this: are all spirits equal, or does there exist among them a hierarchy of ranks? They are of different degrees according to the degree of purification to which they have attained. And here we have again the word purification, this process of the depuration. According to the degree of purification, according to how much they are actually rid of those impurities that we all start with, we acquire, and then we start this depuration, this long, long process. Is there a fixed number? I love the curiosity here, because is there a fixed number or of order or degrees of purification among spirits? Can we classify them? And they're going to say the number of such orders is unlimited, because there's nothing like a barrier or line of demarcation between the different degrees of elevation, these different degrees of purification. Nevertheless, if we consider the general characteristics of spirits, we may reduce them to three principal orders or degrees. So this level of advancement then, they're saying, has to do with how much, how many qualities they have acquired, how many impurities they have gotten rid of. So they say, okay, if you really, basically they're saying, if you really want a classification, we're going to give you. We can summarize them in 3 different orders or degrees. And I'm going to put them in ascending order, so from least evolved to most evolved, according to the Spirit's book. The first one is the 3rd order. And in this 3rd order, there are 5 classes, 5 categories. This 3rd order, they call them the imperfect spirits. This is all in the Spirit's book. So in this 3rd order, these imperfect spirits, they're still, the characteristic about them is this this big influence that matter has over the spirit. So the spirit has less influence over matter. And as they go, even within that same order, as they go, they're going to say, they're going to change. So like the 10th there, which is impures, has its characteristics compared to the noisy and boisterous, who are already a little bit more purified, a little bit more evolved. And they're going to say that they have the characteristics is that this propensity to evil, this idea that selfishness, pride still govern a lot of their behaviors of these spirits of the 3rd order. They're going to say that not all of them are thoroughly bad, and that they don't have an actual idea or the true sense of God. So they're saying, okay, if you want classification, if you want like an order, here it is. 3rd order, these are the general characteristics of this order. As they evolve though, there's 2nd order. We have the benevolence, the learned, the wise, the high. And again, as we're going up, so this is 4 classes. So we have 5 in the 3rd order, 4 in the 2nd order. The 2nd order, they call the good spirits. So there's a predominance of the spirit over matter. There's still this interchange, this interplay of both, but there's a predominance of the spirit over the matter, which is the contrary for the 3rd order. And we'll see as we go, this relationship between matter and spirit becomes even stronger in the sense of the spirit having total control over matter. So in this 2nd order, called the good spirits, they say that some of them possess scientific knowledge, others acquired wisdom, and they're more charitable, and they have better moral excellence. So this is what they're saying. Overall, this is what they are. They still have to undergo the discipline of trial until they have completed the work of purification. Meaning, this need or even this option as they go up in that scale there, to reincarnate, to go through these trials and tribulations, to go through these expiations all over again, because they're still not completely over. They don't have their impurities completely gotten rid of. But the thing is, they're evolving. Again, we're evolving. And then we have the 1st order, called the pure spirits. In this 1st order, there's only one order and only one class. That's it. So the pure spirits, they're going to say, are those who have passed through every degree of purification in the scale of progress, and they have freed themselves of all the impurities of materiality. So the material exerts no power for them over the spirit anymore. Their spirit is that evolved, is that purified, is that strong, that they have total control over that. And having attained the sum of perfection, which created beings are susceptible, they no longer need to undergo the process of trials, these expiations, these reincarnations. They don't have to go through that anymore. They are that purified. And so that's the 1st order. So how do we purify then? How do we go through this process of spiritual depuration? And one of them is these challenges, the pains, these expiations, all of these things that we suffer, and we use them as learning material for our purification, as ways to purify ourselves. Message number 150 from The Way, the Truth, and the Life is called goads, which I had to Google what this object was, because even in Portuguese I didn't know. But it turns out is a sharp, pointy object that's used with the ox. So when you're harvesting or when you're building your field and all of that, preparing the field, the ox is going to go in the direction that you want, but it pricks the ox. So it's something prickly that pierces. So then it moves because you're like basically like poking it with a stick, basically. This is what golds is, what the word goad, or the plural here, golds is. So Emmanuel is going to say in this message 150, what's the analogy then with the golds in us? The evolutionary way is covered with golds. It's covered with these pointy things that if we're not following what we need to be following, we're going to get a little poke in the back there in the leg, and then we're going to have to move forward. We cannot go back. We can slow down our progress, but we cannot go back. And these golds are these things that in our evolutionary way, as he's saying, we're going to encounter. According to this plan, Jesus has created the noblest stimulations for the terrestrial sphere. Thus, wealth and poverty, homeliness and beauty, suffering and struggle are actually goals of opportunities implemented by Christ for the benefit of humankind. So he's saying here, he's talking about these different types of goals, these different types of these instruments that are going to propel us forward, that are going to help us move forward in our process of purification. Each existence, he says, has its particular difficulty, as does each person. But this symbolizes a blessed opportunity. Examine your life, identify your goals, and do not rebel against them. So not to rebel against these goals that appear on our path, appear in our lives, and that is indeed, sometimes, indeed, the higher spirits even the benefactors trying to help us to evolve. Prepare these goals, these opportunities that we have to evolve. Still in the same message, he's going to say, God gives himself to the children of his entire creation, sharing with all of them the treasures of his infinite love, stimulating them to evolve by means of 1,000 different ways. Of course, 1,000 different ways, because there are 1,000 different goals that we can encounter in our lives that are going to propel us forward. And he's going to say, still, there are many spheres like Earth where the inhabitants have not yet grasped these glorious realities, and so they halt their progress, slumbering on the bed of illusion. So he's saying it's not just on Earth. First, there are many mentions. We're going to just take a brief look at that. So there are many mentions. There are many planets, many spheres that we can utilize that are similar to Earth to evolve. But we are here. This is where we are. These are the goals that we have. And he's saying here that it's not only on Earth that there are these people, these inhabitants, that have not grasped these glorious realities, meaning these opportunities that these goals propose to us, and still slumbering on the bed of illusion. What is that bed? The materialistic way. Thinking very narrowly, in a myopic way, in a myopic sense, where we think this is the only existence that we have ever had, and will ever have. On the book Between Heaven and Earth, Blandina is talking to Hilario and Andrea, who are two characters there. And this book is psychographed by Chico Xavier, by André Luiz. And she's talking about the education. So they're studying there in the spirit plane. And they're saying, okay, why are they studying? Is education that important still here? And she says, education may not be a condition for our happiness, but it's crucial for our soul's evolution. So I thought this was beautiful to bring, because as we go through this process of spiritual depuration, as we're learning things in practice, the need to study, the need to improve ourselves through the study, through this education, the right one, is extremely important. So that's what she's highlighting. So she goes on to say that evolution, competence, personal growth, and sublimation are the results of constant toil. And I bolded there, constant toil. The more knowledge we possess, the more active we are. Idleness keeps our mental energies focused on the lowest planes of life. Toil, and we can even translate toil here with these goats, is a blessing. So she's saying that idleness, staying still, staying stuck, inactive, keeps our mental energies focused on the lowest planes of life. If we're doing nothing, if we're Because the truth is, even doing nothing is already doing something, just done the right thing. But if we stay with this mindset of this idleness, we're just going to be staggering the process, you know. The more knowledge we possess, the more we are encouraged, the more it's required from us to go there and help ourselves and others through the spiritual depuration process. I brought here the Leon Denis, which this is one of my favorite books, and he's talking about free will on chapter 23. Free will, because if we go through the process, think about the process of spiritual depuration, of going through these different trials. We spoke about the goals. We spoke about having like an active role, not being idle. Free will exerts an immense role there, because this is a mechanism. This is something that we have acquired through evolution, along with our intelligence. This free will, this option to choose our actions at every single moment. Choose what we think, choose what we say, what we do. So he's going to say here that freedom or liberty is a necessary condition of the human soul, which without it could not construct its destiny. If we didn't have the free will, the freedom to evolve at our own pace, we would be chained to destiny. We would have those ancient ideas of this predetermined destiny, and that nothing could be done to change them, to change our destinies. So free will gives us this ability to construct our own destiny. So he's saying, therefore, let us rise to the conscience of our true role and goal, and we will be free. Through our efforts, our teachings, and our examples, let us make sure that not only willpower, but also goodwill and good itself prevail. Also, instead of forming passive beings bent under the yoke of matter and prey to uncertainty and inertia, here's inertia again, let us fashion truly free souls freed from the chains of fate. So he's urging us to think about this free will. Think about exercising the time that we have every single moment of our time, of our day. When we're talking about spiritual depuration, we're thinking about the layers. We can conceptualize that through the process of reincarnation, through these different reincarnations, these different goals that we have been blessed with in different lives in different material, bodies that we have assumed. So the one here, this is from chapter 14. Jesus is talking to the apostles about some questioning from Nicodemus, I think it was, when he was asking him about the body and all of that. So Jesus is saying here, the body is just a garment, and all material garments eventually become tattered. But as God's children, human beings will always find in His love the elements they need to change the garment. So he's talking about the body as this, as a garment, as something that is disposable, because that's what it is in the end. Mm-hmm. It's something that we use, that was granted to us, that we use to evolve our spirit. The death of the body, he's going to say, is that essential change because the soul will continue to journey through other experiences until it reaches enough light for the final pathway into the kingdom of God with all the perfection it has achieved on the rough roads it has traveled. On the rough roads, because we are still going through those rough roads, and we have been, and we still are, because of our own degree of evolution as a society, as individual spirits, in the plane that we see ourselves in today. And he's saying here that the death of the body is essential, is this essential change. The same way, when we're children, we have clothes that we as adults don't use anymore. We had to change them. We had to adopt new clothes, new vestments, new garments as we grow physically. It's the same thing with the spirit. Because we saw the difference between, the relationship between spirit and matter. He's going to say as well, those who abused the tunic of wealth will wear those of the humblest slaves and servants in the future, just as the hands that wound others may be severed, chopped off. What is he talking about here? Will wear in the future. In the future reincarnations. And even in the spiritual plane, we know from many books from Spiritism about them getting rid of their bodies, but still there, their spirits, their spiritual body, we can call, having these deformations because of what happened to the flesh, to the material body. But then as we think of, they're saying here, as we think of the reincarnation, as we think of those who abuse the tunic of wealth, will come back without that tunic, and those who hurt may have that part severed. And on the book Memoirs of a Suicide by Ivone Pereira, she talks about, there's two characters actually. One of them, this is the book is psychographed by Ivone, but the spirit is Camilo Castelo Branco. So there's two characters there. One is Silveira, and he's one of the, let's call it, friends for the main character. And they all died by suicide. And they're in the other plane. And one of them, when they're about to, sorry to spoil if anybody wants to read the book, but one of them, when they're gonna reincarnate, Silveira is one that he abused the tunic of wealth. But the thing is, he's gonna come back with that same tunic of wealth. He's gonna get a chance to do it again differently, because the situations always change. But he's going to come back with the same tunic of wealth, giving that same instrument, that same opportunity, because that was what was necessary for him to evolve. So he's going to receive that tunic of wealth again. But there's another character called Mayo who killed somebody with his bare hands, and then he died by suicide soon after. But because he used his hands to kill somebody, he is going to come without his hands in this next reincarnation. Meaning exactly what this last sentence here was talking about this necessity that we have to go through these trials that are absolutely important for our own spiritual depuration, spiritual evolution. And if we think of the reincarnations, this is merely an illustration. This doesn't follow this exact path. But we can think of ourselves as we're, spirits are on our journey as that mud right there, simple and ignorant. We're created simple and ignorant. And as we go through our processes, we start to evolve to become purified. And I brought the image of a future here. We can think of, we may have a reincarnation, have had it as a slave. What did we do with that? What did we do when we were in that condition, with that reality? Then we may come as royals, with royalty, with wealth. And it keeps going like this as long as we're learning what we need to learn through each of these. Because the goals from each of these different reincarnations can be very different. Just like the layers of a filter, if we think about it, each layer has its own materials there. Filters its own impurity, in its own way. So we can think of disease, and then we come with poverty, and then we come with power, and all these things keep alternating. Just like the layers are different, our reincarnations, the material challenges we receive can change as we go through our process of spiritual depuration. I put power there, and we can think of power as, could be money, could be influence, could be political power, could be intelligence. There's many different types of having power. And that in itself is also a goad, is also an instrument that we can utilize. But the vaster, until we reach the depuration. Of course, this is overly simplified, and it's just as an example. But to utilize the idea of the filter and the different layers of the filter as we go through this process of spiritual depuration. And between heaven and earth, in that same book, they talk about this vaster, the spiritual resource of those who return to the flesh. Meaning the more we have at our disposal, the more complex the work map to be obeyed. The more responsibility we're going to have. So we saw those layers, and there was this suffering component, this pain component in basically all of them. Because even those who may think, it's wealth and this and that, in the condition that we are, we suffer. And we're in a planet of trial, and tribulations and expiations and all of that. On the book Living Spring, this is by Emmanuel, psychographed by Sheep, we have a lot about suffering. And I brought a few messages here. 61, as long as you're living on a plane of practice such as the earth, you will continue to be confronted with problems and suffering. Each day has a lesson for us. Each experience leaves behind its corresponding value. Each problem entails a determined objective. Each goal has its own objective. We use the same word that Emmanuel used before. 169, let us remember that the inner man continues to be renewed. The struggle enriches it with experience. Pain purifies its emotions, and sacrifice tempers its character. So we go through these changes through the suffering. Because remember, the poking of the goad is not something pleasant, but it makes us, just like the ox, move forward, move in the direction that we need to be moving. So what do we do then with pain? What do we do with suffering? We learn from it, but do we really, and in what way? So I saw this image a while back, and I brought it here because I think it's simple, but it's nice. What to do with our suffering? We can do a couple of different things. We can simply suffer from our pain. We can drag our pain. We can analyze our pain. We can learn from our pain. We can accept our pain, or even the best one of all, we can transform our pain. The pain is still there. The rock is the same. But what's being done with that rock, with that pain, varies. And if we think about, again, the different layers, the different suffering, the different types of suffering, the different pain and the challenges that we have, we can think of this image and realize what is it that we're doing with our own suffering, with our pain. In the Gospel, according to Spiritism, still on the pain and suffering, it says here, the pain is a blessing sent by God to all His elected. So when you suffer, do not allow yourself to become afflicted. Rather bless the omnipotent who, through the pain of this world, has chosen you to receive glory in heaven. To seek the treasures that Jesus said that no thief can steal, and it doesn't get rust. Right? And if we think about Paul the Apostle, he oftentimes in his struggles, and this we can see a lot in the Paul and Stephen book, oftentimes when he's struggling and he's going through those difficult times, he thanks Jesus for the suffering, for the pain, for those trials, because he says, because if I'm going through this incredibly hard time, it's because I'm worthy of it. And this is such a beautiful shift in perspective, because I'm worthy of it. The pain faced, and this is from Joanna, Happy Life, the pain faced with resignation decreases in intensity. And resignation here is not passive acceptance. But that's another lecture for another day. So when do we stop suffering? Do we ever stop suffering? So I found this sentence here that from the book Action and Reaction was amazing. And it says, whenever our pain, Silas says this to André Luiz, whenever our pain doesn't cause new pain, and whenever our affliction doesn't cause affliction in those around us, our debt is in the process of expiring. So whenever our pain doesn't cause new pain or pain in others, our debt is in the process of expiring. So we can all gauge ourselves. What are we doing with our pain? And if our pain is having any effect on the others around us. And we'll know when that doesn't happen, our debt is in process of expiring. Know thyself. So question 919 on the Spirit's book, it says, what is the most efficacious method of ensuring one's own moral improvement in the present life and resisting the attraction of evil? And they're going to answer, one of the sages of antiquity has told you, know thyself. And if we look inward, we can actually have a good idea of our own goals, our own challenges, our own pain, and what is it that we need to overcome. What challenges do we need to overcome? Progress, then. We advance. If you think of the water in the spiritual filter there, it goes down. It doesn't go up. It's going through these layers, as we are going through these layers. Progress is a law of nature. All beings of creation, be they animated or not, have been submitted to this law through the bounty of God, who wishes everything to be exalted and to prosper. Even actual destruction, which appears to men to be the end of everything, is only a means of reaching a more perfect state through transformation, seeing that everything that dies only to be reborn again suffering no consequences from the annihilation. So he's talking about the things that sometimes we think of destruction, we think is the end, this is not progress, like this is going backwards. There's always a purpose behind it. There's always this cycle. There's always this transformation. This is the key word here, the transformation. In the book, Our Daily Bread, it says, there's a message called Think a Little. And it's this. Christ, Emmanuel is going to tell us, Christ began his divine mission among peasants. He lived among irascible doctors of the law and rebellious sinners. He associated with the sick and the afflicted. He ate the hard bread of the humble fishermen and finished up his holy work between two thieves. That's called message number 2, Think a Little. Emmanuel's going to say, what are you hoping for? If you're waiting for an easy life in situations of prominence in the world, remember the Master and think a little. So Emmanuel, so good with his words, inviting us to put everything into perspective and imagine if a spirit of the order of Christ chose to go through all of that to show us so many lessons. What do we have to complain? What are we hoping for? He's saying here. Think a little. In the message, it's called Think a Little. So then if we go through the process of purification, and I already mentioned a little bit about earth being one of the material planes that we go through that. We have on chapter 3, in my Father's house are many mansions. This is a quote we have from the Bible that Jesus said, and this is chapter number 3 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. The house of the Father is the universe. The different mansions are the worlds which circulate in infinite space and offer the spirits who incarnate on them dwelling places which correspond their progress. Conforming to whether the soul is more or less purified, here's the word again, purified, and detached from material lies, the ambient in which it finds itself will vary infinitely. So this idea that as we go through or in the process of spiritual depuration, we're going to inhabit different bodies and different planets, different stations of progress, as André Luiz calls in his books. And in the Memoirs of a Suicide, that book that I mentioned before, they say they mention that there are these infinite numbers of worlds that we have no idea are out there, and it says that the spirit that incarnates there is in such a condition that if we look at those conditions, we would think we are in paradise. And with that, we can think of, again, the planetary transition and how everything goes by comparison. We are exactly in the place that we need to be to continue our process of spiritual depuration. The Spirit's book, then, when it's talking about the blessed, and I put in quotation marks there because blessed, if we think of Jesus when he was saying, blessed are these, blessed are those, he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who are persecuted. So he's saying all these things that nobody wants to be mourning or being thirsty and hungry for righteousness or persecuted. And he's also saying, blessed are the meek, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers. So he's saying all these challenges, and he's saying blessed. Blessed are those who are like that. And if we go to the question 1013 of the Spirit's book, it says here, the state of imperfect spirits who have to expiate their faults until they have attained the complete purification that will raise them to the state of perfect blessedness. So this is a question actually about purgatory. How, like, where is it? And they're saying it's internal. The purgatory, or own hell, is internal. And they're saying here that the state of these imperfect spirits who have expiated their faults until they have complete purification, attain a complete purification, and they're talking about the perfect state of blessedness, because as we saw, blessed are those who are going basically through these trials, and blessed are those who are meek, merciful, pure in heart, peacemakers, all those qualities that we're trying to exercise as imperfect human beings that we still are, imperfect spirits going through this process of purification. And then to end, I wanted to throw this to you guys, and don't say it out loud, but then what about us? What are we doing with the layer, or in the layer that we're in right now, with this unique opportunity that we have. What are we doing in our process, and understanding that we started there and we're going down until we become eventually, long future, purified. But what are we doing with those goals? How are we using our free will with the aim of this, with this process of the spiritual depuration insight? Thank you very much for the time, and I hope everybody has a blessed week.